Nic Burrows, drummer extraordinaire. And people have heard, it's you I'm talking about. People have heard your playing without even realizing it because you played on so many tracks
Yeah.
and played with quite a number of bands. So, Nick, let me first ask you, how old were you when you did your first live gig and what was it?
First live gig. First live gig, I was in the Boys Brigade, and they put a little band together for the Boys Brigade display night. And the guy that they wanted to play drums hadn't got a drum kit, and I had. So they asked me to play instead. So I was second choice there. But we played a couple of Slade covers. I can't remember. Far, far away. We played Far, Far Away, if you remember that from years ago. And that was probably my very first live performance. And then not long after that, perhaps a more memorable one for me was my dad was a organist, and he used to play for dances, like strictly type dances, quick steps, waltzes, things like that. And so at the age of 11, I went and did my first gig with him. So there was my dad on organ, me on drums, and my brother on saxophone. And that was a local liberal club, something like that. And so I remember that sort of as my first full length formal gig at the age of 11.
Wow, that's you got into live gigs quite early then
Oh yeah,
because
yeah,
yeah, 11 that's quite young to be playing gigs.
yeah,
And I was about 17 I think when I did my first, or no, maybe 15, 16.
yeah.
And of course it's a learning curve, isn't it? What
It
what what
is.
what did you learn about doing live gigs, Nick?
I think pretty quickly I felt quite comfortable. My dad was quite encouraging. I think I learned to respond to the dynamics in the music quite early on, because my dad would say, "Okay, keep it down now," or then he would say, "Come on, give it a bit of beat," And so I got to understand to flow with the music probably early on more than anything else.
Okay, and I know that you, in a studio you're excellent at looking out for dynamics in the music, so important because quite a lot of music. I mean, if there's a complaint about modern music, it's that it's all one level,
Yeah,
and I know people do moan about that as an aspect
yeah,
of.
yeah. That's right. Modern music. We use something, don't we, that we both know about in the studio called a compressor, and it squashes the dynamic range of music. It's better for radio play and commercial listening and things like that. But it does have that effect of making the music all sound, at one level. Which in modern music, that's the style, isn't it? So you go with it.
Now, Nick, could I ask you how you got into playing music that glorifies God?
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, so I actually became a Christian when I was about 19, 20, something like that. Not 19, 20, 19 or 20. And I'd played in bands since I was sort of, a young teenager. And I think my dad was trying his best to get me to work that was paid from a playing point of view, but I was far more interested in playing rock and roll and stuff like that. Um, but at the age of about 19, myself and my girlfriend at the time, we became Christians. For me, that experience was, I took it very seriously in terms of what I did with my life, and that included drumming, because that was a big part of it. So we, after probably maybe a year, we found a local church and started attending. And I noticed on the stage there was a drum kit, It was, if anybody's familiar, it was a Ludwig drum kit, the Vista Light ones in rainbow colours. Ah, it was a gorgeous kit. Anyway, there was a guy that played there. We just attended, but I think at that time I'd understood about when you come to God, you lay things down, the good and the bad, you know, and I think I was at a stage where I first attended church where getting up and playing the drums was not the highest priority for me. I felt like it was right to seek other things first, to sort of get to know God and do what was the right thing to do. And so pretty much for a couple of years attending church, I sort of laid the drums down, and I didn't really anticipate it being a part of my life particularly. I might have wanted it to be, but it wasn't at the top of the list. So a couple of years on, the folks at church got to know me, and they said, "Do you want to come and sit in and play?" It really sort of started there. I got up on stage with them and played and listened to the way they played. The dynamic in church music can be very different from in a club playing hard drums. So those lessons about dynamics and understanding the flow of music, I understood that. That was natural to me. So, we went with the flow of things, and that seemed to be the right. I was trying to understand what is being a drummer in church all about. How should I approach this? And I do remember one afternoon I was down there on my own having a practice on the stage, and I was asking God. I tend to ask God quite simple questions, like He's there with me, like I'm sitting on stage and I'm practicing, and I'm saying to God, how do I do this, Lord? How do I play church drums? What am I supposed to do? Do I have to screw my face up like this? And what do I have to do? And very clearly, and this has been the simple way that I feel God communicates with me on a number of occasions. Very simply, I just felt the thought that you could use the words God spoke to me, but I would say it was an impression that came to my mind of God saying to me, "You know how to play the drums. I've given you that talent, that gift. Just play." And that released me to play in church, because I thought, all I've got to do is just turn up and play with the sensitivities that are already there, along with the music. And that is how I started to get into playing at church.
That's interesting, and I like the way that you said that the Lord put that impression upon you, and
Yeah,
you
yeah.
received it from the Lord. And I also like that way that you laid down the drums for a couple of years. Did you think it was somehow not right? Because when you're playing in kind of modern music, you've got a good backbeat,
Yeah.
on the 2 and the 4. You whack that 2 and the 4 out. And I remember when I was a boy, church drummers kind of played marches,
Yeah.
and I was thinking it really needs a bit of 2 and 4 there.
A bit more, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So did you ever talk to people about, is it right to kind of give it this backbeat into church?
To be honest, Paul, at that point where I felt God say to me, the answer to your question is, how do you play church drums? Is just play the way I've taught you how to play. For me, that set me free to take the initiative wherever possible. So if I felt the song needed it, I would give it. And I have to say that I never really had any negative responses to that. Everybody seemed to think that was a good thing. You know, there's an aspect to music which is it's a practical life skill that we learn, whether we're in church or whether not. There's a discipline involved in being a musician, and you don't drop those disciplines at the door when you come into church. So I responded to the music, obviously with a sensitivity to the room, So if it needed it, I would give it, and I think I'm still the same today. I like to give it.
Yeah, yeah. And we like to hear it. So after that, Nic, there came a time when you joined a band called DKF.
Yes.
And I particularly was impressed with DKF because they took church music and they gave it such an interesting arrangement. And you were part of that.
Yeah.
So, and it ran for a little while, didn't it, DKF?
Probably about 5 or 6 years, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. And did you purposely set out to kind of give this worship music a rock and roll feel?
Yes, definitely. The band was led by a guy called Anthony Mills from Stourbridge. A very powerful driving force. He was a great organizer and very passionate. And so we got together with a number of other local church musicians, and the idea really was to take. I think we had the opportunity to go and play at a Christian festival early on, Kingston Festival. If you remember the Kingston Festival down on the south coast somewhere, Wimborne Minster, and the idea was to take existing songs. Like there's a well-known song, Celebration. Celebrate good times, come on. You know that song. And we'd take things like that, change the lyrics to be, Christian focused, worship focused. And we did that with quite a number of songs. And it seemed to go down incredibly well. Particularly at a number of festivals where you got a lot of youngsters wanting to get into that festival atmosphere. And at a Christian festival, it gave them the opportunity to jump up and down and let go a little bit, but with praise and worship. And so that was really what we majored on, doing that sort of thing. And it was good fun. And it's from what I can tell, a lot of people really appreciated it, and it was a great time.
Well, I can say that I've never heard another band like DKF. And DKF actually stands for different kettle of fish, and it truly was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if any of the material's still around online or anything like that, but it's definitely worth checking out.
There's a couple of YouTube videos from when we played Aberystwyth Church.
Okay.
There are a couple of things up there, but I think that's all I'm aware of.
Okay. And because the albums you did, they were cassettes in those days.
They were. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
I think eventually we brought out the final one on a CD, maybe.
Okay.
Some copies done, possibly, but
Okay.
yeah, that was back in the day.
Yeah. And of course, you've moved on such a lot from those days, Nic, playing with lots of different people in different scenarios. And of course, you still play in church, and you were kind of foundational there, in the worship band. And wasn't there a time that the Lord spoke to you about being a foundation?
You choose that word there very well, because I do remember a time, from time to time I ask God. I'm sure we all do. We ask God questions. I said earlier about my sort of simple approach of asking God simple questions like he's sitting next to me, but I just can't really think of another way of doing it. But one day I was down at church after the service. I don't want to be crude or anything, but I'm just being real. I was in the toilet, and I'm just sitting there, And I was just having one of these little chats with the Lord, and I was sort of soul seeking, and I just said, you know, am I, Lord, am I doing the right thing here? Am I in the right place? Is it what you want me to do, etc., etc. Just having this little sort of conversation in my head with the Lord, and I quite clearly, I suppose, as I said before when I was first starting to play in church, I really felt clearly the Lord say to me, "Yeah, you are up there. You are the bedrock of the band from a rhythm point of view. You hold that together. It's an important thing, and it's what I want you to do." I just felt the feeling that God was saying, "You're foundational. You're a foundation stone, if you like, in for the rest of the folks to build on." Um, and I thought, yeah, that feels good. I I go back into the church, and people are going home, and milling around a little bit. And a guy, John Whitehouse, who was at our church at the time, he came up to me. He said, "Oh, Nick," he said, he says, "Hi, I really enjoyed watching you up there this morning playing. Really great." He says, yeah, he says, you count the band in, don't you?" He says, and they can't do anything until you start this kind of. He says, "You're a foundation, aren't you, up there?" And it's one of those moments where you just go, I couldn't have written this. Someone who got no idea of the conversation that I was just having, the thoughts in my head. A few moments later, there's a direct confirmation that God helped me there. He encouraged me and said something to me. I mean, I wish every question to God had an immediate answer like that, but on that occasion, I felt the warmth of the Holy Spirit saying, "That's what you do. That's what I want you to do." Yeah.
Praise God. That's a great story. And of course, in the church, the living stones that make up the spiritual household of God, we need foundations
Yeah.
in there. I think in Revelation it does talk about the apostles being the foundation stones, and the building goes up from that point, and in the church that's alive today in this generation, we also need these foundations that are around, and you are one of those, Nick, because I know over the years you've been so totally faithful and rock solid, not only as a drummer
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
as a person there in the church, and someone who is a stabilizing force, because every building, it needs kind of girders, RSJs and things to
Yeah.
hold it up straight, and you are like that. And so we're so glad that you can shed light and help us to
Yeah.
grow in different ways. And I know that you and we've done quite a number of gigs together and quite a lot of studio work.
Yeah.
And it's not always plain sailing, we have to say that, but we always come up with a good product. So what's your philosophy in the studio when there's differences of opinion, and what do you how do you view that, Nick?
Well, as we know, music has a lot of it's a lot to do with personal taste. Um, and I think the thing is, when you're working together on something, particularly when it's artistic, there are it's quite natural that there are going to be differing views on how a thing should form. Um, so you've got to start there. You've got to start with get all the ingredients out and have a go and do what you think. But then at the end of the day, somebody needs to guide the ship and say, I like that, or I like this, I prefer that. And so really my job in the studio is to serve that, is to serve, there may be, maybe times when we have a laugh and we go, oh, I really like this, Paul. I really want to play this. And you go, I would like you to do this, Nick. And so we have a laugh about it. But we're passionate about it, aren't we? We're passionate about the music. But at the end of the day, we have a job to do there, and we have a job to do as friends as well. So we work together, and yeah, I'm absolutely fine with that. I've done such a lot of studio work, and really, there are times when there is a very specific, clear direction about what I should do. So I try to go with that. There are times when I'm given completely free rein to do what I feel, and sometimes we go with that. Sometimes it's a mixture of both. I mean, quite more often than not, there's a collaboration and a mixture. But someone has to make the decision. So I'm going to do that.
I've heard stories about musicians in studios and they get kind of miffed. And bands, they fall out and they split up. Even good bands that are heading in like a really good direction split up because of personality clashes, as it's known.
Yeah.
But it's good though. I know in the Raindance studio over the years we've had differences of opinion, but we've always had a good unity among us, and if there is any harsh words,
We had harsh words, Paul.
no, not
Oh, yeah.
really, not
No,
really, but we're quick to forgive and
absolutely.
move on because we keep the overall aim of getting a good product, a good piece of music to the
Yeah.
fore there, and it's good that we keep that unity of the spirit through the bond of peace, as the scripture says. That's really important, and you're so good at that, Nick. You keep us all heading in the right direction, both musically and spiritually. And you've got such a lot to add as well. With the music. Some drummers, they just play drums and that's it. But you have got a good feel for the overall aspect of what's going on here in the music. And that's such an advantage to have people like that around, as well as Chris Smith, who
Sure.
plays keyboards.
Yeah.
He's got, and it's great to have a team like that who are always ready to offer advice. But if that advice is ignored, then it's no problem. Everything's
Yeah.
good.
It's all good.
It's all good. Yeah. Okay, Nick. Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing so much.
Very welcome. It's
Yeah,
good to talk to you, Paul.
yeah, we appreciate it.